The day started like any normal shooting day. The sun was bright. The studio was busy. People walked in and out carrying equipment, checking lights, adjusting camera angles, and fixing last-minute details. There was noise everywhere, but inside that noise everyone still knew when something felt wrong. And something felt wrong the moment Sandra Bullock walked in. She greeted everyone with a smile, the kind of smile she used when she did not want anyone to ask her anything. It was soft, polite, and perfectly shaped, but it did not reach her eyes. Those who worked with her for years knew how her real smile looked, and this was not it. Still, nobody said a word. Actors had quiet days. People assumed she just needed time. But Keanu Reeves noticed it the moment he saw her. Keanu was standing near the corner of the set, reading a few lines again, even though he already knew them. He always liked reading lines before starting. It helped him move into character with calmness. When Sandra walked in, he looked up. He did not say anything. He only observed how slowly she moved, how she kept holding her phone as if she was expecting a message, how her shoulders seemed a little heavier than yesterday. He knew this was not normal for her. They were about to film an emotional scene, one that needed stillness and focus. The director explained the setup. Sandra nodded, Keanu nodded, and they both moved into their positions. The cameras rolled. The room became silent. The moment arrived for Sandra to deliver her first line. But she could not say it. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Her eyes blinked faster than before. Her hands slightly trembled. She looked like someone who forgot the simplest thing, but it was not the line she forgot. It was something deeper. Something inside her mind had collapsed for a second, and she could not hide it. The director said cut. The crew waited for Sandra to reset herself. She tried again, and again she missed the line. It was not like her. Something was not right. People whispered. Someone behind the monitor softly said she might be tired. Another person said maybe she was stressed. Someone even joked under their breath that she was losing her touch. The words were not loud, but they were loud enough. Keanu heard it. He felt something inside him tighten. He did not like when people judged others so quickly without knowing anything. But instead of reacting, he quietly walked towards Sandra. She stood near a table, trying to fix her breathing. She kept her eyes down so no one could see the emotion slipping through. She touched her forehead with her fingers and took slow breaths. When she saw Keanu walking toward her, she straightened herself as if she wanted to pretend she was completely fine. Keanu stopped a few steps away. He spoke in a calm voice, the kind of calm that makes people feel safe. "Sandra, can we take a small walk?" She blinked, she looked surprised, but she nodded without a moment of resistance. Keanu signaled to the director that they needed a quick break. The director agreed. Everyone stepped aside, trying not to stare but still staring because they were curious. Keanu walked with Sandra behind the set, a quieter place where the noise from the crew sounded far away. Sandra avoided his eyes at first. She kept telling herself to stay strong, to stay professional, to not break down. She inhaled deeply. She forced herself to act like everything was normal. Keanu watched her struggle. He recognized the same struggle he had once felt years ago during a different film. He remembered the weight. He remembered the pressure. He remembered pretending to be strong when he was not. That memory still lived inside him. He asked her in a gentle voice, "Do you know why people fall apart when life gets loud?" Sandra looked up, confused, almost startled. The question sounded strange. She tried to answer, but no words formed. She only shrugged. Keanu continued, "Because they forget they are allowed to stop for a moment. They force themselves to keep going. They carry everything until it hurts." Sandra swallowed hard. Her eyes began to shine a little, but she still tried to hide it. Keanu leaned against a wall, keeping his tone soft. "I know this because it happened to me once. I lost focus. I forgot my lines. I felt like I failed everyone. But someone told me something that changed me. They said courage is not doing everything perfectly. Courage is knowing when to breathe." Those words entered Sandra like a slow wave. She felt something shift inside her. Her hands slowly relaxed. She looked at Keanu, really looked at him, and she saw no judgment. Only concern, only care, only someone who understood. She whispered, "I just don't want to cause trouble for anyone." Keanu answered, "You are not trouble, you are human, and humans feel. And sometimes the strongest people forget that they are allowed to feel." Sandra closed her eyes for a moment as if she was holding back a storm. When she opened them, they were wet. She tried to wipe them quickly, embarrassed that someone could see her this vulnerable. But Keanu gently shook his head. "You do not need to hide anything from me," he said softly. Those words broke the final wall she had built inside herself. Without warning, Sandra's breath shook. She confessed in a trembling voice that she had received worrying news about a close family member but did not want to say anything because she feared the production would get affected. Keanu listened without interrupting. His expression carried the same softness it always had, the kind that made people feel seen. He said, "You never have to suffer in silence. People care more than you think." Sandra felt a wave of relief and sadness at the same time. She had been holding everything alone, thinking she needed to be strong for everyone else, but it was destroying her from the inside. She had forgotten something important. She had forgotten she was allowed to ask for help. Keanu placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "We will get through it together." Those simple words made the world heavier and lighter at the same time. She breathed deeply for the first time since she entered the studio. She felt calm. Keanu guided her back to the set, but slowly, giving her time to settle. The crew watched them in complete silence. They did not know what he said, but they knew something had changed. The tension around Sandra was gone. The heaviness was no longer on her face. She looked peaceful, even though she still carried worry inside her. And the moment the director called action again, something unexpected happened. Sandra delivered her line with clarity so deep that every person in the room froze. It was powerful, emotional, perfectly controlled, and filled with raw honesty. The entire set fell silent. Nobody said a word. Everyone felt the shift. They did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The sun had barely risen when Sandra arrived. The studio was quiet. Only a few lights were on. The crew had not fully gathered yet, but Keanu was already there. He always arrived early, but today it felt as if he came even earlier. He stood near the old wooden bench outside the main entrance, sipping warm tea in a simple paper cup. When he saw Sandra walking toward him, he lifted his head gently. His face carried a calm expression, the kind that made the morning feel softer. Sandra expected him to act like nothing happened yesterday, but he surprised her. He smiled, not a loud or obvious smile, but a warm one that said he remembered everything and respected everything she shared. She sat beside him quietly. For a moment they both watched the empty set. It looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for what lay inside her heart. She thought she had fully recovered after yesterday, but something still weighed on her chest. Something heavier than before, but this time she did not try to hide it. Keanu sensed it without needing her to speak. He had always been the kind of person who saw what others tried to bury deep inside themselves. He said softly, "How is your heart today?" Sandra let out a small breath. "Still heavy," she whispered, "but I am trying." Keanu nodded. "Trying is enough." She looked at him, unsure what to say next. No one had ever made her feel this safe while being seen so clearly. She was used to people expecting her to be strong all the time. She was used to hearing words like "you will be fine" or "everything will work out." But Keanu's words never rushed her. They never forced her. They simply held space for her truth. The director arrived and called them in for rehearsal. But even as they walked inside, Sandra felt Keanu's presence beside her like a quiet support. She did not feel alone anymore. She felt grounded. Rehearsal began with a simple exchange scene. Sandra already knew the lines, but today something unexpected happened. Halfway through the rehearsal, her phone vibrated. She froze for a second, knowing who it might be. She hesitated to look at it. The entire room fell silent. The crew watched her. The director waited. Sandra lifted the phone slowly and checked the message. Her eyes suddenly softened. For the first time in 2 days, there was a small, genuine smile on her face. Keanu walked closer. He did not ask what the message said. He simply looked at her with a quiet question in his eyes. Sandra nodded. "It is good news," she said. "Things are getting better." The crew relaxed. The director sighed with relief. Everyone smiled. But Keanu noticed something deeper in her expression. Yes, the news brought comfort, but something else inside her still felt unsettled. The scene continued. Cameras rolled. Sandra delivered her lines with strength and clarity, but during one particular moment she paused longer than she should have, only for a second. But Keanu saw it. He watched her chest rise and fall in a slow breath. He noticed how her fingers lightly curled at her side. The director did not notice, the crew did not notice, but Keanu did. When the director called for a short break, Keanu walked over to Sandra again, not too close, not too far, just enough to make her feel safe. He asked, "What did you feel in that moment?" Sandra tried to answer, but she hesitated. Finally, she said, I felt fear. Even with the good news, I still felt fear. I do not know why. Keanu nodded slowly. Fear does not disappear just because something becomes better. Sometimes fear stays because we never learned how to face it. Those words settled inside her like a soft echo. She whispered, I thought it would fade today. Keanu replied, it does not fade, it changes shape, and when it changes shape, we must learn something new about ourselves. She asked in a trembling voice, what if I do not know how to learn it? Keanu looked at her with kind eyes. Then you let someone teach you, and there is no weakness in that. Sandra's heart felt warm. She was not used to lessons like these. She was used to advice that sounded like commands or solutions. But Keanu gave her truth in the softest way. He made her realize she was allowed to be taught. She was allowed to grow. She was allowed to be human. The next scene required deep emotion. The director explained the vision. It was about two characters who understood each other beyond the surface. Sandra listened, feeling her heart race. She did not know if she could reach that emotional depth again today. She feared breaking mid-scene. She feared disappointing everyone. The old fear was still there. Keanu sensed her tension. He took a step closer and whispered, look at me during the scene, not the camera, not the crew, look at me. I will hold the moment for you. Those words carried weight of trust, weight of care, weight of presence. The cameras rolled. The set fell silent. Sandra inhaled deeply. The scene began with her character confronting a difficult truth. She tried to speak her line, but her voice shook for half a second. Keanu saw it instantly. Without breaking character, he shifted slightly, focusing all his attention toward her. It was not noticeable to the camera, but it was noticeable to her. She lifted her eyes and saw him looking at her with the same calm expression he had outside. Suddenly, she felt grounded again. She did not feel small. She did not feel judged. She did not feel alone. She breathed, and then she delivered her line perfectly. The director whispered to the assistant, this is beautiful, this is real. But the moment that surprised everyone did not happen in the scripted scene. It happened right after. Once the director called cut, Sandra stayed still. Her eyes did not move. Her hands did not move. She looked frozen, but not in fear, frozen in realization. Something inside her had opened. Something she had been ignoring for years finally rose to the surface. People around her waited, confused. The director stepped forward to check if she was all right. The crew whispered again, but this time their whispers carried concern instead of judgment. Keanu walked to her slowly. She looked at him with wide, emotional eyes and whispered something that caught the entire room off guard. She said, I never learned how to be gentle with myself. The room went silent, truly silent. Keanu did not rush to answer. He let the moment settle. Then he said quietly, that is why life sends you people who will show you how. The entire crew froze. Because they all understood one thing. Sandra Bullock was not just acting anymore. She was healing in front of them. And Keanu Reeves was guiding her with a level of kindness they had never witnessed before. And this was only the second part of the journey. The next morning arrived with a quiet softness in the air. The studio usually felt loud and rushed during early hours, but today something was different. The crew moved gently. Voices stayed low. Even the sound of equipment rolling across the floor felt strangely calm. It was as if everyone sensed that something important was happening between Sandra and Keanu, something deeper than their work, something that deserved respect. When Sandra walked in, her steps were slow but steady. She looked rested, but not in a physical way. It was the kind of rest that comes from being understood. Still, traces of uncertainty lingered around her eyes. Fear was not gone. Fear never disappeared overnight, but there was a new kind of strength in her posture, a quiet strength that had begun forming the moment she admitted her truth yesterday. Keanu was already there, rehearsing alone with a script in his hands. He did not read it like an actor trying to memorize lines. He read it like someone studying the emotional world of the scene. He had always been that type, someone who tried to understand the soul of the moment before he performed it. When Sandra entered, Keanu looked up and gave her a small nod. Not too cheerful, not too serious, just gentle enough to say he was there for her without needing to speak. She walked toward him with a soft smile. It felt natural, like something inside her trusted him now in a way she did not fully understand yet. Today's shooting schedule had more emotional scenes, scenes that required closeness, scenes that required honesty, scenes that could trigger the same fear Sandra had been fighting. The director gathered them both and explained the plan. The first scene of the day was a confrontation. Their characters had to face each other with unspoken tension, revealing emotions they had been hiding for a long time. The director wanted depth, rawness, vulnerability. Sandra listened carefully, but she felt a slight pressure build inside her chest again. What if she froze like before? What if she broke in front of everyone again? What if she disappointed the whole team? Keanu noticed the subtle shift in her breathing. He stepped closer and asked very quietly, "Do you want a moment before we begin?" Sandra wanted to say no to show she could handle everything. But she remembered what he said yesterday. She remembered the lesson. She remembered that being human was not weakness. So she nodded. They walked to the side of the set again, away from the bright lights and busy voices. Keanu stood in front of her, not too close, but close enough that she felt supported. She said, "I thought it would become easier today, but the fear still comes." Keanu nodded. Fear does not disappear, but we learn how to meet it calmly. That is the real strength. Sandra lowered her eyes. "I want to learn, I truly want to, but I do not know where to start." Keanu took a slow breath. "You start by stopping for a second, breathe, feel, do not rush. You already took the hardest step when you allowed yourself to speak yesterday." Sandra inhaled deeply. For a moment the loud thoughts in her head softened. She lifted her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered. Keanu smiled softly. "We do this together." They walked back to the set. The lights turned on, the cameras prepared. The entire crew watched silently, knowing how important this moment was. The director called action. The scene began with tension. Their characters stood opposite each other, holding years of unsaid words between them. Sandra had to deliver a line that carried emotional weight. She looked at Keanu, but not as her character. For a moment, she looked at him as herself, searching for stability in his presence. He met her eyes calmly. That one look grounded her. She breathed, and then she delivered the line with steady emotion. The director smiled behind the monitor. But the real test came in the next line. It was heavier, deeper, designed to shake her character to the core. Sandra opened her mouth to speak, but her voice trembled again. Doubt rushed through her mind. Memories of yesterday returned. Her heart pounded. Keanu saw it instantly. Without breaking character, he shifted one step closer. It was not in the script, but he did it naturally. He reached the emotional space she was falling from, and he held it for her. Something inside Sandra softened. She repeated her breath. The fear did not leave, but it loosened its grip. She delivered her line, and this time she spoke with clarity and truth. The room went silent. The scene ended. The director whispered to the assistant that they might have captured the strongest moment of the film so far. But Sandra did not feel victorious. She felt reflective. Something was changing inside her, something she did not fully recognize yet. Keanu walked toward her slowly. "You did it," he said. Sandra shook her head. "I did it because you were there." Keanu replied, "You did it because you allowed yourself to be present." She looked down at her hands. "I want to believe that, but I still feel something inside me, something I cannot describe." Keanu's expression softened. Sometimes when we open the door to our emotions, old feelings come to the surface. Things we ignored, things we forgot, things we never healed. Sandra listened with full attention now. "Is it normal to feel this unsettled even when things are improving?" "Yes," Keanu said. "It means your heart is waking up." The break ended and they prepared for the next scene. This one was lighter, a conversation shared between their characters, a moment of comfort, a moment of understanding. It should have been easy. But for Sandra, something unexpected happened. As they acted the scene, Keanu delivered a simple line, a calming line, a line about trust and presence. The line was part of the script, but the way he said it felt too real, too close, too sincere. Sandra froze. Not with fear, not with panic. She froze with recognition. Keanu noticed immediately. He quietly lowered his voice and asked, "Are you all right?" Sandra nodded slowly, but her eyes were distant. She said quietly, "Something inside me remembered something." Keanu stepped a little closer. "What did you remember?" Her voice was soft, fragile, but steady. "I remembered that I have not allowed anyone to be this kind to me in a long time." The crew stopped, everyone turned. The director's eyes widened. Keanu did not move. He did not speak. He simply stood there with the same gentle expression. Sandra continued, "Every time someone tried to help me, I pushed them away. I thought needing someone meant I was weak. I thought standing alone meant I was strong. But now I see I have been wrong for years. I forgot that kindness is strength too." The entire room froze in silence, and Keanu said only one thing, in the softest tone she had ever heard from him. "I am not here to carry you. I am here to walk with you." Tears formed in Sandra's eyes, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of release, of understanding, of healing. The crew watched with pure silence. The director lowered his hands. And for the first time, Sandra felt something inside her shift completely. She was not alone. She did not have to pretend. And for the first time in many years, she allowed someone to stand beside her without pulling away. This moment would change everything, the next scenes, the next choices, and the next truth she was about to face. And none of them knew the reveal that was coming later. A reveal that would freeze everyone on set. The next day arrived with a strange tension in the air. The studio felt different, almost heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. People moved carefully around the set. Every whisper was quieter than usual. Every step felt softer. Everyone could sense that something deep was unfolding between Sandra and Keanu, but no one dared to talk about it openly. They only watched, waited, and tried to understand. Sandra arrived later than usual. She walked in with steady steps, but something in her eyes looked uncertain. She had slept, but not peacefully. She spent most of the night thinking about yesterday, replaying every moment, every word, every feeling that came to the surface. She had realized something important, something she had not faced in years, and now she was afraid of how much it mattered. Keanu was already there. He stood near the camera, checking the script with quiet focus. When he looked up and saw Sandra entering, he gave her a small nod. It was the same nod he used every morning, but today it felt different. It felt like an anchor, something that told her she was safe. She walked toward him slowly. "Good morning," she said quietly. Keanu smiled gently. "Good morning." There was a silence between them, not uncomfortable, not awkward, but a silence that held unspoken truths. Sandra wanted to say something, but she did not know how to begin. Keanu did not push. He never pushed. He always waited for her to speak when she was ready. The director called them both to discuss today's scenes. They were heavy scenes, emotional scenes, scenes that required the deepest parts of their characters. Sandra listened, but her mind wasn't fully on the script. Her heart was still stuck on something she remembered last night. While everyone prepared, Keanu stepped closer and asked gently, "You seem quiet today. What is in your mind?" Sandra inhaled slowly. "Something you said yesterday stayed with me all night. I kept thinking about it. I think I understood something, but I do not know how to say it." Keanu nodded. "Take your time." Sandra looked around at the crew, the lights, the cameras. Then she looked at him. "I realized how long it has been since I allowed anyone to see the real me. I have been living behind a wall I built years ago. I used the wall for protection, but now it feels more like a prison." Keanu listened carefully, not interrupting, not rushing. Sandra continued, "I did not even know how deep that wall went until you spoke to me yesterday. You reminded me of something I forgot, that it is okay to be human, it is okay to feel, it is okay to ask for help." Keanu's eyes softened. "You remembered something important." "Yes," she whispered, "and it scares me." Keanu asked, "What part scares you?" Sandra held her breath for a moment. "The part where I realize how much I need to learn. I have been strong for so long that I do not know who I am without the strength. I feel lost." Keanu took a small step closer. "Being lost is not a failure. It is the beginning of clarity. When we break our old walls, we do not become weak. We make space for new strength." Sandra felt warmth in her chest. She nodded slowly. "I want to learn how to build that new strength." He replied softly, "You will, and you will not learn alone." The director called for the first scene. Sandra took a deep breath. She and Keanu walked together to the mark. The lights lifted. The cameras prepared. The air became silent again. This scene required raw emotion. Sandra had to express vulnerability on camera, something she had been avoiding in real life for years. She felt her heartbeat quickening. Memories from yesterday returned. But then she looked at Keanu. He gave her a calm look, a steady look, the same look that held her together before. She breathed. The director called action. Sandra began her lines. The words came slow but firm. She felt the emotion rising naturally, not forced, not pushed. Halfway through the scene, her voice cracked, but instead of panicking, she let the emotion flow. She let the crack happen, and Keanu responded to it perfectly, staying in character but grounding her with every expression. The director whispered, "Beautiful," almost under his breath. They continued the scene. Sandra's eyes filled with tears, not from weakness but from honesty. She allowed herself to feel, she allowed her walls to open, she allowed her truth to speak. When the director called cut, the entire set fell silent. Sandra stood there, breathing heavily. She did not break down, she did not run. She simply stood still, letting the moment settle inside her. Keanu walked toward her slowly. He looked at her with pride, not loud pride, but quiet pride. He said, "That was real." Sandra wiped a tear softly. "It felt real. It felt like something inside me opened." Keanu nodded. "That is growth, and growth begins with truth." The break came. Sandra stepped aside to drink water. She leaned against a wall and closed her eyes. She thought the emotional weight would make her feel tired, but strangely she felt lighter, like something heavy had finally been lifted. Keanu joined her moments later, but this time he carried something in his hand, a small folded paper. He held it out to her without saying anything. Sandra looked at him, confused. She unfolded the paper carefully. Inside was a single sentence written in simple handwriting. It said, "You cannot carry everything alone, even if your heart tells you to." Sandra blinked, speechless. "Did you write this?" Keanu nodded. "I wrote it a long time ago when I was going through something difficult. Someone told me this and it helped me. I carried it with me for years." Sandra looked at the sentence again. The words went deep inside her, deeper than she expected. "Why are you giving it to me?" Keanu answered softly, "Because I think you need it now more than I do." Her eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you, Keanu." He smiled gently. "You are not alone, remember that." Before she could say anything more, the director called them back for the next scene. But as Sandra walked with the small note held gently in her hand, the entire crew noticed something different. She was no longer walking with fear. She was walking with understanding, with strength, with a new kind of calm. A calm that came from being seen, from being supported, from being understood. But none of them knew what was coming next. A moment so unexpected that it would silence the entire set and reveal a truth deeper than anyone imagined. The real twist was on its way. The fifth day on set began with a strange stillness, not the peaceful kind, but a quiet that felt like the air was waiting for something. The crew moved around carefully. Even the sound of footsteps seemed softer. Everyone sensed that something important was building, something connected to Sandra and Keanu, something none of them could name, but all of them could feel. Sandra arrived holding the small, folded note Keanu gave her yesterday. She kept it safe in her pocket, touching it gently from time to time. She did not tell anyone, but she slept with the note on her bedside table because the words inside it gave her a kind of strength she had been missing for years. When she entered the studio, she found Keanu sitting on a wooden crate near the lighting stand. He was reading through the script with a calm face. When he saw her, he lifted his head and gave her the same quiet smile he always offered. But today, something about his eyes looked deeper, more thoughtful, as if he knew something important was going to happen. Sandra walked to him slowly. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied. There was a moment of silence between them again, the kind of silence that carried trust rather than discomfort. Sandra felt her chest settle a little. Ever since she started opening up, her heart felt lighter. But at the same time, a new fear had formed inside her, a fear she had not spoken about yet. The director called for the morning briefing. Today's scenes were the most emotional ones yet. They were the scenes where the characters finally confronted the truth they had been hiding. The director explained the emotion, the intensity, the flow. Sandra nodded along, but her focus drifted. Keanu noticed. As soon as the briefing ended, he walked to her side and said gently, "Something is troubling you." Sandra sighed. "Yes, I can feel something inside me, but I do not know how to name it." Keanu guided her toward a quiet corner behind the set. They stood between tall lighting stands and the soft shadows of the curtains. It was a private space, hidden from the crew but close enough to hear the movement around them. He asked, "What do you feel?" Sandra lowered her eyes. I feel afraid again. I thought I was getting stronger, but every day another emotion opens inside me. I do not know how to handle all these feelings at once. Keanu folded his arms lightly, not in frustration, but in deep thought. Healing is not a straight line. You do not climb in one direction. Some days you rise, some days you fall, some days you stand still. All of it is part of the journey. She listened, breathing slowly. He continued, but the fact that you feel so much now means your heart is waking up. That is good. That is progress. Sandra thought for a moment, then she looked up at him with soft, tired eyes. I just do not want to break again in front of everyone. Keanu stepped closer, his voice gentle. You will not break, and even if you do, breaking is not failing. Breaking is allowing yourself to become whole again. Those words settled deep inside her. She felt something loosen, something she had been holding on to for years without realizing it. They returned to the set. The crew prepared, the lights lifted, the cameras focused. Today's first scene was heavy. Sandra had to reveal her character's hidden pain to Keanu's character. It was scripted, but the emotion behind it was real. It mirrored everything she had gone through the past few days, and that scared her. As she stood at her mark, her hands trembled slightly. The crew noticed. The director noticed. Keanu noticed before anyone else. He stepped closer and whispered, "Look at me." She lifted her eyes. He said softly, "I am here, stay with me." Her breathing slowed, the trembling softened, she nodded. The director called action. The scene began. Sandra opened her mouth to deliver her first line, but instead of speaking, her voice caught. It was not fear this time. It was emotion, pure, raw emotion rising from deep inside her. Everyone watched, waiting. Keanu stayed perfectly still, perfectly present. He did not break character. He did not rush toward her. He simply held his emotional space, allowing her to step into it. After a long second, Sandra finally delivered her line. Her voice cracked. Her eyes filled with tears. But she spoke, and in that moment the entire room froze. The emotion in her voice was so genuine that even the camera operator forgot to breathe for a moment. The director leaned forward, mesmerized. The scene flowed with natural intensity, every word heavy with truth. Keanu responded with equal honesty. They created a moment so real that it hardly felt like acting. It felt like two souls meeting in the open for the first time. When the director finally called cut, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The room fell into complete silence. Sandra looked down, emotional and vulnerable. She feared she had exposed too much. But then she heard footsteps approaching. Keanu walked straight toward her and said 4 simple words. That was your truth. The words hit her harder than the scene itself. She looked at him, tears slipping down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the realization that she had been holding herself too tightly for far too long. Keanu gently placed his hand near her shoulder, not touching, just close enough to offer steady presence. Sandra whispered, I did not know I had that inside me. Keanu replied, you always had it, you just never allowed yourself to feel it. She took a shaky breath, it hurts. I know, he said softly, healing does hurt. For a moment she closed her eyes, allowing herself to absorb the comfort in his words. The director approached them slowly, still in awe. That was the most powerful scene we have filmed so far. Sandra, are you all right? She nodded, yes, I think I am more than all right. The crew clapped quietly, respectfully, no loud cheering. It was a moment too sacred to disturb. During the break, Sandra sat alone on a small wooden box, holding the note Keanu gave her. She stared at the sentence again. You cannot carry everything alone, even if your heart tells you to. She whispered to herself, I understand now. But just as she whispered it, Keanu appeared beside her. He asked gently, what did you understand? Sandra turned to him, her eyes shining. I understand that I have spent years pretending I was strong because I was scared someone would see my weaknesses. But now I see that pretending is not strength. Trusting is strength. Letting someone stand beside me is strength. Keanu listened with the same calm understanding he always carried. She added softly, you taught me that. Keanu shook his head gently. You taught yourself, I only reminded you. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the assistant director calling them back to set. But as Sandra stood up, she felt different, lighter, clearer, stronger in a way she never expected. And yet, she did not know the biggest moment of all was coming. A moment that would reveal the truth Keanu had been hiding. A truth that would freeze the entire set and change everything between them. The shock was only one scene away. The final day of shooting arrived quietly, almost too quietly. The entire studio felt different from every previous day. The crew spoke in soft voices. Lights were adjusted with extra care. Even the air seemed to move slower. Everyone knew they were reaching the end of something powerful, something far bigger than a film scene. Sandra entered the studio holding the same small note Keanu had given her. She had kept it close every single day. Today she held it even tighter. She knew this last day mattered, not just for the movie, but for something inside her that had changed forever. Keanu stood near the set, reading the final script pages, but he looked distracted in a way Sandra had not seen before. His calm face carried a deeper weight. His eyes seemed thoughtful, almost troubled. He did not look up immediately when she entered, which was unusual. Normally, he sensed her presence without even looking. When he finally lifted his head and saw her, he smiled softly, but the smile did not reach his eyes this time. Sandra walked toward him slowly. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Keanu nodded, but a small hesitation appeared in his expression. "Yes," he said softly, "just thinking." Sandra felt a quiet worry inside her. She had grown used to reading him the way he read her. She stepped closer. Thinking about what? Keanu looked around the studio, making sure no one was too close. Then he said, "About today, and about something I need to tell you." Sandra's heart skipped for a moment. "Is everything okay?" He nodded again, but it was not a confident nod. "It will be," he said, "after I explain." Before she could ask anything more, the director called them for the final briefing. Today's last scene was one of the most important in the film. It was emotional, honest, and required deep vulnerability from both of them. The director explained the beats carefully. Sandra listened, but her eyes kept drifting back to Keanu. Something inside her wanted to know what he had been holding. After the briefing ended, Keanu gently touched her arm. "Can we talk before we shoot?" She nodded immediately. He led her to the quiet space behind the set, the same place where they had shared their deepest conversations during the week. The shadows felt familiar. The silence felt protective. Keanu looked down for a moment, gathering himself. Then he lifted his eyes and said quietly, "There is something I have not told you these past few days." Sandra felt her breath pause. She waited. Keanu continued, "I recognized what you were feeling because I lived through something very similar years ago. Not many people know this. I never told the crew. I never told the director. Only a few close people knew." Sandra stepped closer, her eyes gentle. "What happened to you?" Keanu exhaled slowly. "I once worked on a film while carrying something painful inside me, a personal loss. It was heavy. I felt like I had to stay strong and not let anyone down. I forced myself to keep going. I never told anyone I was struggling, and because of that, I broke more than once, but I always broke alone." Sandra felt emotion rising in her throat. "Keanu." He shook his head softly. "I do not tell you this for sympathy. I tell you because I do not want you to go through the same silence I did. I know how it feels to pretend you are fine when you are not. I know how it feels to hide your pain because you think the world expects perfection from you. I know how it feels to fear disappointing others." Sandra felt tears forming. "Why did you never tell anyone?" Keanu looked at her with calm honesty. "Because I thought being strong meant being silent. I thought strength meant handling everything alone, and that was my mistake. It took me years to understand that strength is not isolation. Strength is allowing someone to see your truth." A tear slipped down Sandra's cheek. Keanu continued, his voice softer. "That is why I noticed your struggle on the first day, because I saw myself in you. I saw the weight. I saw the pain you were trying to hide. I knew that look." Sandra whispered, "You were trying to protect me." Keanu nodded. "Yes, because someone once protected me when I was falling apart. And I promised myself that when I saw someone else walking the same lonely path, I would not stay silent." Sandra felt her heart break and heal at the same time. She whispered, "Thank you for telling me this." Keanu smiled, but his eyes carried deep sincerity. "I wanted you to know before we shoot the final scene, because the scene requires truth, and now you know mine." Sandra reached out slowly and held his hand. It was not planned, not scripted, just human. You are not alone either, she said softly. Not anymore. Keanu held her gaze, and something gentle passed between them, something honest and respectful. The assistant director called them back to set. The moment was over, but its meaning stayed. The final scene began. The lights dimmed slightly. The set became silent. The director watched carefully. In the scene, their characters were supposed to face the truth they had been hiding, the truth they feared would break their bond. It mirrored everything happening in real life. Sandra delivered her lines with raw emotion. Her voice trembled, but she did not hide it. She let the vulnerability pour out naturally. She let the truth breathe. Keanu responded with equal sincerity. His voice was soft, steady, grounded, holding her through the moment without overshadowing her. The crew watched in silence. Some held their breath, some felt tears rising. The connection between them was not acting anymore. It was real humanity being expressed through scripted words. Then something unexpected happened. All at once, Sandra stepped out of character. The line she spoke next was not part of the script. It came from her heart. She whispered, "Thank you for teaching me how to feel again." The director froze. Keanu froze. The crew froze. But Keanu did not break the moment. He looked at her with soft eyes and replied with equal honesty, also off script. "And thank you for reminding me that sharing pain is not weakness." The room became still in a way no one had ever seen before. No cameras moved. No one dared to breathe too loudly. The director quietly said, "Keep rolling." Sandra stepped closer to Keanu, tears gently sliding down her face. "I am not afraid anymore," she whispered. "Not of myself, not of my feelings, not of letting someone in." Keanu answered, "And you never have to carry anything alone again." The crew felt chills. The director whispered, "This is magic." When the scene finally ended, the director called